and welcome to the Womxn Show. I'm Lenina Rassool, and today we are speaking about community, collaboration, healing, and sisterhood. After the break, we're going to be speaking to Kelly Collier, who is a founding member of the Sacred Unity Circle, a movement started by a group of women to bring women together in order to facilitate greater self-awareness and community healing. But before that, we're going to have a look at some footage from their most recent event, the Matriarch March, that was held on the 21st of March, Human Rights Day this year, where women gathered at Princess Vlei in Cape Town. Let's have a look.
Shine our light, shine our light, shine our light, shine our light.
Yes.
Shine our light.
There we go.
Shine our light, 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 shine our light.
Hey, Lily, so we can see you. Your footsteps walked that path and you came now to what is called Princess Vlei. So there's a story to this Vlei, which is the story of our heritage, which belongs to us. It's the story of the land.
Together for peace as messengers for peace. Together for peace as messengers for peace.
Diddy-dee, oh diddy-dee, a diddy-dee, oh diddy-dee.
Every single person came here and brought their gift. We started with poets, we had the group sharings, we had such beautiful voice artists, and all I can say is thank you, thank you, thank you. This is about access to information, because access is power, and the power is in the relationships. So we need to wake up and build our relationships so that we can access the power that we have, because we have it, we're just not using it. Much love, peace and respect, and we hope to see you again next year. Blessed love. Hey, to you. Love, love, love all around.
Take me from my land, the sun come, take my land from me. Walk on, I began to slave, rock, for the family's sake.
That was some footage from the Matriarch March by the Sacred Unity Circle. We are going to take a short break, but we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching the Womxn Show, and today we are speaking about community, collaboration, healing, and sisterhood. And joining us today is Kelly Collier, who is a member of the Sacred Unity Circle, a movement started by a group of women to form a movement for community and sisterhood. Kelly, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Kelly, I wanted to ask, the Sacred Unity Circle is described as building relationships
Thank you.
together as a collective response to the need for community and communion. Could you tell us more about the movement, how it started, what you guys do?
Right. So maybe I can start by telling you a bit about what our vision is. So our vision was really about finding a space for women of all ages, young and old, to connect together in a progressive interfaith God consciousness. And for each, to create a space where each individual could share something into the space communally and also be able to teach. So in essence, having that intergenerational exchange and really re-enlivening that, because it is a part of our indigenous culture, and in some ways, those connections have been forgotten. And then our principles, which each member adheres to, is that each individual commits to building the sisterhood on the virtues of love, trust, and integrity, we have a space, hold a space for open and honest expression where we can listen and share our views and also be respectful to each other and create an environment of support and care. And then our mission statement is for our programs to support the self-awareness and personal development of women and girls, to uplift our marginalized communities and bridge the segregations between religion, race, gender equity, and socioeconomic status. Promote cultural education and the arts by networking with local artists, artisans, crafters, etc., and with much emphasis on creating mentorship opportunities. So that's just a little bit of a brief, a more formal kind of framework around who we are and what our goals are. But we really are women who connected just personally and in social circles and through our own endeavors towards self development and working in various vocations, but really with a shared common interest in community upliftment and wellness and realizing the importance of each individual's contribution to the wellness of society, because only in aiding your own healing and your own progression and development can you really be a conduit for that to be happening in your community, micro and macro perspectives. Yeah, so that's really how the movement initiated. It was really just an organic process of we've been together, we've been communing in positive ways, sharing our skills, having conversations, spending time together in different frameworks. But how can we make this more constructive and more pointed towards actually effecting change?
That's lovely, and it sounds really inspiring, and it sounds like a movement that is needed. I will say, here on the Womxn Show, we interrogate like a lot of issues that women are facing that's really reported on, and often movements are started in response to something. So I'm sure just in the social interactions as we've done on the Womxn Show, also women will come together, and part of what you're speaking about, part of the things that you want to heal individually and in communities in response to I think negative things that are happening. Can I ask, when you come to the table, what is it? Communities are so fragmented, I think what I want to say. What are some of the issues that you find women have to deal with in their personal lives that led to the starting of this movement? And why is it so important for women to come together to speak about these things?
No, absolutely. I would like to begin with the comment that you made about how women are fractured, in our sisterhood. And I think when each woman, if you really sit with that and you actually say it, there's almost that fracture kind of works its way through your very being, because by nature and in our evolution, and I think certainly as people who are wanting to be responsive to our communities, that is a devastating statement to make. Certainly, where we find ourselves in South Africa, the motherland, the spirit of Ubuntu, the spirit of the man of man, the indigenous, the energy of the land that we live in, the indigenous cultures and how wise they were and intuitively in touch they were with community wellness. I think it really is an upsurgence of the spiritual world really saying, look, guys, ladies, you need to actually take this on, and this is something that you need to facilitate for yourself. And so we found that in different ways, I think women were ready and reaching and asking actually for this, and extremely responsive to the call in the variety of ways that we had extended an invitation. Initially, for myself, I really wanted to find a space also where I could express myself, as a woman. I'm 43 years old now. I have 4 grown children. I'm kind of midway in my career path. But I really had myself asking these questions: What am I contributing to my community? How can I channel my skills and my specific view and what I feel is in my purpose, and connect it with other women? And how can we really make an impact? Because I think when one person tries to do something, it's good and it's wonderful, but we can only make so much of an impression, on actually what is happening out there in our communities. And yet when we bind together, there's so much more strength. And I found myself reflecting on what are the issues? Why are we not doing that? Why is it surface level interactions, where there's so many serious things happening? And yeah, so that was an entry point for myself personally, but I think for the different women, of course, there were similarities where that met. Also, a big part for me was about expression, artistic expression. I love to sing, I love to write poetry, write stories, and I found myself, saying now, where do I express this to? Who do I express it to? I'm not doing it for performance. I don't want to do it for an audience and become a performer. I want to actually share this energy because I realize in myself that it's actually calling on spirit. It's a spiritual expression. It's allowing myself, availing myself as a conduit for the spiritual world to speak to my people, to the cause, to my position in life, to my destiny. And so, that just brought me to this presence of how, in so many indigenous cultures, when we look at that, how people commune, there's always singing, there's always dancing, there's always artistic expression, there's always just expression of where we are, whether it be in a position of pain, whether it be in a position of joy. We tell each other our stories so that we can grow our collective sympathy and empathy and introspect. And that is the wisdom, is the knowing, the power in the relationships. And so if we want to find the solutions, we need to be ready and willing to engage and have those conversations and engagements. And I think that I can say that I speak for the women in our group. In that is where we connect. Is that we know that there's this urging in this time, and it's outside. It's in every diverse culture, religion. It's not specific to only. I'm speaking a lot about the indigenous peoples, but I'm more related to the land that we live on and the energy of the land and the vibration of Africa and what it speaks to, because that is a powerful element, and it's something that we need to consider. But across the cultural, so to say, lines and, religious lines and whatever they may be, I'm finding that women are feeling this and they are inspired to action.
Thank you. I mean, I absolutely, like you said so much.
Sorry.
No, it's wonderful. And I wanted to jump on quite a few things, but I wanted to pull out one thing you said, which is something that I've also been noticing. When we speak about intuition, I love that you said women are acknowledging that there's a collective calling towards not just doing something about the societal problems that we're seeing and experiencing, but also reconnecting to things like, land and the energy and ourselves. And I wanted to ask, there is a very, women have a very dark history of oppression and suppression. And I love to say on the Womxn Show, it's actually not that long ago when we had no legal rights whatever. We were basically property. We forget that as the generations roll around, we forget that we were basically property. And through that also how we were raised, how our ancestral women were raised within this box of how we're supposed to be. And a lot of that disconnected us from our intuition, disconnected us from our indigenous heritage, from the land. And I think I just want to ask your opinion on that, whether that comes through in the conversations, but about the disconnect or the fracture. Is there history to that?
Yeah, I think you are as qualified as I am to speak to that. We know that there's a history to that. Every woman knows that instinctively, and whether we are ready to address it or whether that is where we are in our process, of our journey, our destined journey, is another question. And I think this is what the circle is finding, is that people who are ready to take that on, people who are ready to go there, are coming, and they want to have these explorations, and they are open to sitting with it, and open to hearing what other people have to say, not only women, connecting into the indigenous knowledge keepers, people who've worked intensively with having to really delve into it and search for the pieces of information, because it really is scattered, as you say, and it's been buried for so long that it's almost it's a huge excavation process of its own. But how beautiful it is when, when we can unearth something, and there's this instinctive connection. You mentioned the word instinctive, but also, yeah, your own, I think, going back to the picture of the land, within your DNA, we have all of these knowledge awarenesses within us. And I think sometimes it just takes something to trigger it. And this remembering, this bringing back, if you even if you look at the word remembering, to bring back certain aspects which are taken apart, because they actually are in membership together, bring a whole. So it's about bringing back the pieces of our collective histories and identity, which is a huge, huge task. But however, it sits with us to do the work, because if we look at the global identity that is readily and steadily on the rise with exposure to social media and the extremities of just what's out there, and the the demographic that are most at the mercy of that are the youth, because they are still, of course, all of us are in our forming of our identity, but in adulthood, you've walked a certain path and you can contextualize, you've had experiences. But for the youth, this is the reality of what is shaping them and who they will become. And so I think, as custodians of where we find ourselves in Africa, it's a huge responsibility to really ask those questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? Who are my ancestors? And in that process of who am I becoming, and how do I hold space? And this is one of the main inspirations behind the Matriarch March.
And so you brought up the Matriarch March. I mean, I love that. I want to ask, before we speak about the Matriarch March, actually, I want to ask, like, you're saying really interesting things. I'm going to say that I grew up sort of completely unaware of, I was taught mainstream schools, so what we were taught in in history. And I will add, Kelly, that you have been a preschool teacher for 15 years. And so just within that education space, I found it really interesting to ask you about your thoughts on the things we are taught. Because what I'm feeling now, and when I was reading also about the Sacred Unity Circle and the linkages to our Indigenous history, and for us to be thinking about, we don't learn any of those things in school. And so, I'm also, I'm heading into my 40s now, and I'm just thinking, I keep saying to people as I'm learning more, it's like, if I had known these things when I was a young woman, the trajectory of my life would have been so different. The harms, I think, that I would have that I've been exposed to might have been so much more minimized, maybe not gone, but minimized. I would have been able to make better choices, and I would have been able to know myself. You spoke about youth and how important it is for them to be able to form an identity, but still we see they are not being taught these things. What are your thoughts sort of on those things and our exposure to this type of knowledge?
Yeah, I think, my humble opinion is that we really need to come back to this point of also acknowledging ourselves. It comes back to this sense of self-worth and self-acknowledgement, because only when we acknowledge ourselves will we be able to see the worth. And I find that many people who have, out of their own volition, delved into Indigenous knowledge studies, whether it be through a higher institution or whether it be through their own life experience, they still are not being asked these very important questions. They're not being consulted, and I think that they hold a lot of guidance to hold this process. When you look, the grad. I mean, it's in the older generation. It sits with the older generation. There are people who have been able to hold on to that, and have been able to access those aspects of themselves. And also, people who are, for example, the herb doctors. In the Rasta culture, you often see these. I don't know if you've seen them, the brothers in the sackcloth.
Yes.
That's an example of how the ancient knowledge is still being preserved and being administered. But yet there's still such a jaded perception of who they are. And, obviously there needs to be some kind of regulation around, knowing when one is of sound practice to be able to be giving advice and to be able to be directing people. But I think we first have to value what we have before it can actually, find its substance and be able to grow and thrive. And there's lots of place for this to happen in our education system. If we look at the education system that we currently work with in the government schools, I feel like children are really being divorced from who they are actually, because it's a process of learning so many facts. But if I look at my own children's experience, which was interesting for me because my children, because I had worked at a Waldorf school, they had the experience of going to Waldorf school at the primary school level. And then when they had to go to high school, I couldn't afford for them to go to Waldorf high school because I was just in this fortunate position of, obviously having a discounted rate as I worked at the school, and so therefore they could go there. But then when it got to high school, they went to mainstream schools, and just looking at the difference in terms of everything, the way that they were held as human beings and the individuality was nurtured, into how does this form this individual? Are they free thinking? Do they think within preconceived boxes, and only those possibilities need to be ticked as right or wrong? Shaping individuals who are able to create and who are able to come into a space and think independently and creatively. And that's just one example of an education system, and doesn't even necessarily prescribe to our current, geographical demographic. But there's a certain amount of freedom within the curriculum which allows for the teachers to infuse, what is actually happening in the environment and what are the current issues in a way that enlivens the education. So I think as a society, there are definitely going to be upsurges towards how can we look at the education system that's being rolled out en masse in our public and government schools, and that really needs to come from also, are we ready to have the conversations? Do we want it? Are we ready to face the fact that children are not being met unless they are able to pay for good quality education? They're actually not being met on a soul and level, and I think even intellectually, I would say that there are some areas where, it's really about force feeding because there's so much content and you're having to cover all this content. And the conditions are completely not, conducive to learning because you're sitting in a classroom that was built probably like 60, 70 years ago, and the windows are dusty and they can't even use the toilet at school. I mean, this is a local experience, the school that my kids go to, and I mean, I would say it's kind of in the middle range of like what's happening at the government schools. There are schools that are worse off, So yeah, we need to start with our own stoop, so to say, when they say sweep at your door, at your front door first. So yeah, there's a lot that needs to be done in our education institutions, but we can start with outside of school, with
And I'm sorry to break your word, but I think we need to go to a break quickly.
Okay.
I love what you said. I do think, I asked that question also for us to think about, if the education system is even what it is, what responsibility that plays on the rest of us. As the movement has created the Sacred Unity Circle to connect, how do we also provide a framework, I think, for our kids outside of mainstream school that they're going to now. So I really love that you sort of brought that in. But we need to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and we are in studio with Kelly Collier, who is the founding member of the Sacred Unity Circle, which is a movement by women for women to look at communion and community. And Kelly, before the break, we were speaking about, what the Sacred Unity Circle is all about. And on the 21st of March, on Human Rights Day this year, you guys held a Matriarch march when you invited women to gather at Princess Vlei. So can you tell us what that was about?
Absolutely. So the Matriarch March was really born out of this yearning for women of all generations and backgrounds to come together under the celebration of what it means to be a woman in this time, and also looking at our role in society. We spoke a little bit earlier about the fractured sisterhood per se, and what that translates into looking towards the future, because it's so important. It's so important to have relationships where we can find support, where we can find a sounding board, where we can find consultation in supporting each other through these processes. And these were always part of the way of life, in our society, and for various reasons. This has really uh, become lessened. I wouldn't say it's completely resolved. I think maybe sometimes people direct it into different energies, and maybe sometimes it's not as wholesome as it could be, and as health inducing as it could be. And when I speak about health, I mean that in a holistic sense, and much of it is steeped in trauma, the trauma that we know our society and our communities are still dealing with, specifically the communities which are marginalized, because we all live in trauma. It's just a fact of modern day life, we are our senses and our natural being is assaulted by the way that we've so to say evolved, and in finding our way back to the way of nature that is in tune with nature, we will be able to soothe and heal that more. Mhm. Your question, just remind me of your question.
Oh, it was asking, yes, what the Matriarch March was all about. And also, just loving that you brought the word matriarch in there, that the day is intergenerational, that we spoke before the break about, the learning that happens. And often I see the learning happens both ways. So from older women, and then also coming up from younger women, but just, what was the basis for the Matriarch Day and what was sort of done there?
Yes. So even the exploration of the word, you brought up the word matriarch, when one looks at what is the definition, because I think it's not a very commonly used word. And maybe people would think about animals, they would refer to nature, elephants are matriarchal, for example. There's certain kingdoms in nature where you can see that very strongly as a way of life. But just to also acknowledge that women are such an integral part of what holds society together. When we look at different aspects of our communities, from the holding space in the home, both practically and in terms of the social human needs, to looking at in wider community, and how we hold the values of society in a way, because we are shaping children, mostly the women are the caregivers, so we are the ones who are actually shaping the generation, obviously in conjunction with the men. We're not saying that the guys are not doing anything, but really to acknowledge what women do in society, and also looking at who are the matriarchs, who are the women, the role players that the new generation identifies. And it's just interesting to see, if we think about our own children, who would they say is a role model for them? Would they say someone as a woman that stands out for them, as someone who brings a message, or even just stands out for them in this time? Because children don't, or young people don't, I don't think, go into or are at the place where they have an intense reflection of unpacking someone's identity and what it means to them. They're just impacted by it. And so when we look at this picture of how we were affected, and if we reflect on our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, if we had the fortune to meet them, the aunts, the extended families, our teachers, what were the roles that they played in our own understanding of our cultural identity, and our own understanding of our religious context, of even our own, like as you say, path to life, and how influential that is. And so, how does that information or that responsibility transfer now into this new generation of women who are holding space, who are matriarchs? And so, yeah. So that is how we came to this understanding of we need to be awake to the fact that we are all matriarchs as women. We are holding space, and we need to take that position, and through that, we are united in all of our roles because they are numerous and they are so diverse. And yeah, and also highlighting, you mentioned the different areas and issues that women face, and also just identifying and knowing that we need to start from a place of self healing. The intention brief for the matriarch was for each of the groups that were invited initially, because this was a pilot project and we'd like to have it annually. We decided to hold it to a specific scale so that we could manage and really facilitate the process with this group. And so the groups that we had invited to participate, to collaborate rather, we encouraged them to have an artistic process within their groups and to really look at what do they identify as a priority issue in their community. And we do know that there are many issues that are rife in all, in, you could say, most of the communities because of the impact of, Group Areas Act and all of these different things and the different elements that brings in. But really, each community does have its specific, flavor to say, and issues that are really burning and that the communities are dealing with. And so I took it upon myself to present a reflection for the community where I reside in at the moment, which is Lotus River. And so I used this as an example for the groups to further explore. And what I shared was that in my community of Lotus River, where I live, there are really very many issues. But one issue which stands out for me is something that really, I find unacceptable and really painful, is that we have a very deep, I would say it's a practice almost in a way of predatory behavior, where we have the older generation, from my perspective, really taking advantage and robbing the younger generation of really coming to fulfill their full purpose and destiny. People are marginalized, young women and boys, it's not only girls. Their family structures dissolve, parents are perhaps on drugs or completely under resourced or really, really just marginalized. And how do these young people find a way to find some relief uh, out of their conditions, which are quite difficult, really, really difficult situations. And what you find is that people who are meant to be the space holders, people who are meant to be creating bridges and opportunities, are taking advantage of that. And I say that in a collective way because as communities, we need to take responsibility collectively. And so now we see the cycle continuing and continuing and continuing to a point where, we've seen it before. Generational trauma resulting in teen pregnancies, drug abuse, lack of self-awareness, lack of self-esteem, which has, there's a plethora of negative social conditions which will come with it. And I'm a resident there, so I see that this is potentially what will happen to the next generation, which is, I mean, what's going on? How are we standing by and allowing this to happen when there are things that we can do? You know. So yeah, the Matriarch March was really about giving people this mandate and saying, can you look at this? What are the issues? So I identified that predatory behavior was one of the issues in Lotus River that really stands out to me as something which needs to shift. And then to look at what could be a positive value, moral community value that we'd like to see replace that. And so what came was the value of trust. And so we put the focus on the positive to say that we collectively call on the community to work towards a space where we can have trust in our community. And so the angle of the march was really to call on and to conjure up more the positive values that we'd like to see, because there's a lot of negative, and we are constantly bombarded with it, even when we see the marches. And I'm not saying I completely support and salute whichever way people choose to protest or present the truth. But in our case, we chose to enter from a point of highlighting what we would like to see and not to put energy to the negative, which we are very cognizant of is there and which is prevalent.
Thank you, Kelly. And I absolutely love that. Something I've been personally interrogating is that we spend a considerable amount of time and energy. And like you said, also we should, highlighting what the problems are and also unpacking the problems and trying to really dig deep and understand. Actually, this morning I was telling myself, understanding the how and the why, but I also, my next thought was like, at what point does the how and the why become a barrier? Where we keep digging in there and directing energy towards that. And shouldn't we also be, shouldn't we be focusing a large part of the energy and attention on what do we want to build as well? Otherwise, it'll never come to fruition. And so I really love that. I want to ask, and one of the ways that we seed and we root these things is by bringing people together. So when we talk about fractured, we know that in our communities, we know through movements like yours and through the very broad sort of NGO and non-profit spaces that there are many people, and many of them women, right? A lot of them, I think, in our communities are women who are doing the feeding, who are trying to do the healing, but really a lot of them feel like they're working in silos and they're working alone against immeasurable sort of, sometimes the work itself becomes a trauma because the problems are so big. And so and you mentioned that the Matriarch March and it is about trauma. So women, much of it is steeped in trauma, and that's a fact of modern life. And so I wanted to ask, in the bringing, what is the value of the bringing together of groups? And I want to tell the wider audience, because all the communities out there are grappling with some form of trauma, as you said. Every community has got its thing. What is the value of bringing people together and becoming a safe space? I love the term use, a space holder, creating safe spaces, and the value also, I think, of witnessing. Because that's the other thing. We're in these silos, we all have this trauma, but we know it is taboo to talk about the bad things, especially if the bad things have happened to us. And so when you create a safe and sacred space, is there value, and have you seen value in just being able to speak about these things and also being able to have a safe witness for the trauma?
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, we also understand that, when you open the gates of trauma, you better be ready to catch whatever comes out, because we all release and express in different ways. And so we've been very cautious, certainly within the sacred unity space, how we manage that, and really entering very consciously into what we choose as topics for exploration, or even the modalities of healing that we select to work with them, so we carefully consider that. But going back to this picture of why the conversations are important, is exactly that, as you started off saying, to reconnect, to reintegrate, these very segregated communities in some ways, to a larger effect, in order for us to be able to change that narrative of a fractured system to a system that is growing towards healing, that is growing towards being functional, because it's just with too much flippance that we can say, oh no, we're dysfunctional, and it always tends to be the people who are disadvantaged who are dysfunctional. We don't need these too many resources to be functional. We just need to make a decision that this is what we're going to do, and we're choosing. And we'll make mistakes. We're not going to be perfect, but we will be striving towards betterment all the time. And only when we can really see that reflection in each other and have those conversations, will we be able to know and find our way forward. It's through that commune, through that reflective commune, that we will be able to find the way forward that will be to the betterment of everyone. And that's been interesting for us, is also leaving this space for spiritual guidance within our interactions, and that's so interesting. What I've heard, that I've heard this from most of the coordinators and people who are in the varying groups, is that there's such an awareness of the role of spirit in the work that we do, and how, when it's coming from a place of good intention and pure intention for the healing of the community, for higher purpose, that it finds its place and it meets its mark, and we are able to find those connections and find the collaborations that are right for that moment, that speaks to that moment, because you can't do everything in the same, there's so much. So you can't do it all in one go. I mean, we'd love to. It's a feast of, the work, even the fact that we are doing the work. I see the passion. I see how people come alive when they talk about what they do, and how they're able to make impact. And even just someone saying, at the Matriarch March, one of the women who was with one of our collaborating groups at Pontyville, Walking Ladies, was saying how she just loves going to her club and how it just lights her day. And, never mind all the issues that she goes home to, because it's not as if the issues all fall away because all of a sudden, you're busy with some wonderful light work. The darkness is still there, but then at least we can have a connection of, oh, wow, okay, now, yes, this is what we are going through, but it's okay. There is a way. And I think that encouragement makes a huge difference to your mind frame, because we manifest, what we project, we manifest. So we need to project positively.
I love that. And I think also, it creates almost like you said, the darkness is still there, but it creates some sort of buffer, sort of a buffer of connection to help you deal with that. I just want to say, sorry, we're running out of time. We've got 2 minutes left, and I just wanted you to sort of say, how people can get hold of the Sacred Unity Circle, become part of it. But before that, I just wanted to say, when you spoke about, when you pulled out sort of the words or the descriptions of disadvantaged and dysfunctional, that I was reading the other day, how powerful naming is. And I was just reading this book that you're speaking about, when you give something names, names hold power, and how we can rename ourselves. And so I just wanted to sort of put that out there. But and so also just creating a movement and naming at the Sacred Unity Circle, and renaming sort of the challenges, and again naming the community, renaming the communities in a place of power as opposed to a place of weakness. So I think like that is very powerful, and I love that you guys are doing that. Kelly, we have 2 minutes left. So if people want to get hold of the Sacred Unity Circle, just to even find out more, find out how they can, do similar things in their community, how do they get hold of you guys?
Okay, so we are not as advanced in terms of our connective position, but we do have a Facebook page. So you can contact us on our Facebook page, the Sacred Unity Circle. And you can also contact us through myself as a contact member. Yeah. Okay. I can provide my phone details if that is in order, or my email address actually.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I know that's on the Facebook page also, because I was on there. Obviously, immediately went on there and liked it. So the details are on there. So thank you so much for joining us and for just coming on and having like this really, really wonderful conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Good to meet you. And thank you for the work that you do as well.
Oh, thank you so much. So we are going to take a short break, but we will be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching the Womxn Show, and we've been speaking about community, healing, and sisterhood. Now, before the break, we spoke to Kelly Collier from the Sacred Unity Circle, and we were speaking about women and their contributions to communities, but also the need for women to heal themselves so that they can heal the communities. We are almost at the end of the show, but before we go, we're going to play a short video about women and celebrate their contributions, because that's what the show is all about. Let's have a look.
het getrou met 'n man van Leliefontein. Hier het ek die kultuur kom beleef en besef dat ek hou van die kultuur. Dis aangenaam. Ek wil hierdie kultuur laat voortleef en daarom het ek besluit om te begin met 'n kookskerm en die namiddag. Kom na Leliefontein en kom ervaar ons tradisie. Jy kan in 'n kookskerm eet. Die kookskerm word gemaak uit bos. Dis 'n tipe vygie en ons pak die kookskerm met die vygie. Kookskerm beteken eintlik kombuis, want dit is waar ons voorouers hulle kos gemaak het. Die kos wat ons gebruik is uit die veld uit. So mense hou daarvan om heeltemal iets anders te kom ervaar. Ons is heidaglik 6 vrouens. Ons werk baie nou saam. Dis ons besigheid en ons bestuur dit as 'n groep, as een. En dit werk uitstekend. Mense kom en hulle kom slaap in hierdie matjies sit. Ons gebruik 'n tradisionele kommetjie sodat mense hulle kan was daarin en dis 'n belewenis vir die mense. Die riet word in die vlei lande gaan pluk. Dit is omgewingsvriendelik en so dit gaan weer terug na die natuur, want na 'n sekere tyd kan jy nie meer die mat gebruik nie, jy kan nie meer die latte gebruik nie, so alles gaan terug in die natuur in. Ons mense is baie gelukkig. Die mense kry swaar, ons mense het nie regtig inkomstes nie en die kookskerm en die nammehutte. Dit is 'n werkskepping aan ons gemeenskap. So ons sit brood op die tafels van mense neer. Ons maak staat op die veld om ons kultuur kan laat voortleef. Maar nou kom ek agter dat die weer het verander. Ons het 'n Climate Change Diary gekry van Conservation South Africa. Die Climate Change Diary help ons, want nou kan ons ons werk uiteensit. En ons probeer soveel as moontlik om ons werk voor te berei. In die verlede het Leliefontein geen akkommodasie gehad vir toeriste nie. Maar nou het ons die kookskerm, ons het die nammehutte en dan het ons ook die lodge. Vir Conservation South Africa is dit 'n wow. Want was dit nie vir hulle nie, dan was hierdie projek nie moontlik nie. My droom is om die gemeenskap meer en meer werk te gee, sodat ons mense 'n broodjie op hulle tafels kan hê.
That was a short video celebrating the contributions of women to communities. Now, as we've said earlier on the show, when you are doing healing work in communities, it can often feel like you are alone, fighting against insurmountable challenges. Find yourself a sisterhood. It helps. And that's all we have for today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lenina Rassool. Goodbye.